Hello, it's me again from Sandy Cogdill Designs, and today I have another interactive card. I am still playing around with the Trinity Stamps and Sassy's LLC collaboration. It's the emergency card number 3, double slider. And when I first saw this, I thought, oh my gosh, I can use that for my favorite stamp set, which is the Summer Gnomes. I have made a ton of cards with these little guys on it. I think it is, out of all my stamps, and I have a lot, this one is definitely my favorite. Anyway, I'm also using it to enter into CraftRoulette challenge number 269. All the things on this card just kind of hit those parameters for this last episode. Go ahead and hit subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos. You can follow me on Instagram at Sandy Cogdill or on my blog www.sandycogdilldesigns.com. Let's get started. To start off, I'm using a 6x6 piece of cardstock, and I am using the Backyard Pool stamp set. I love this set. It's just the perfect setup for these little friends of mine. So I'm going to use my Misty. Go ahead and stamp that. And then we're going to start masking. Since I've used this backdrop a number of times, I already have a mask cut out of a one-sided stick paper. I believe Trinity Stamps is called Rip and Stick. And I've just got that cut out, leaving the open or the water area of the pool open, and then the area up above the little picket fence open also. I'm going to start this card by laying in my clouds. I'm using Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide ink, and I'm using the Trinity Stamps Puffy Cloud Layers stencil. And I'm just going to start at the top and move down till I get to a little bit above the pickets, and then I just take my brush, and there's just a little bit of ink left in it, and just kind of add a little bit of blue above those pickets. I just don't want it to end at white. I think you need to have some type of horizon line. Next, I'm going to put in some water. So I want this kind of to look shimmery and have a little bit of movement in it. I decided I would use the cow print stencil to kind of help me achieve that effect. So I'm going to first put down a very, very light layer of tumbled glass, and then I'm going to place my stencil on top of it and just go over those openings where the pool water would be and just darken up that tumbled glass. Then I'm going to move my stencil around, put it in a different spot, and I'm going to use some Mermaid Lagoon, and I'm going to stencil that in with a fairly dry brush over all of those little open spots. And then to wrap up my water, I'm going to move the stencil yet again, and I'm going to use Peacock Feathers Distress Oxide ink. Once I'm done putting in all of my different little layers, I will go back over one more time with a very, very light coat of Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide ink, just to kind of blend everything together. I think this makes a really neat looking watery surface, and it's kind of amazing that it's the cow print that does that. I'm going to remove my mask, and then I will go ahead and start coloring the background. Like I said before, have used this mask a number of times. So once I peel it off my card or the surface that I'm working on, I just stick it to the back of my stamp, I don't know, what do I want to call it? Stamp packaging. That way I always have it available. This one is kind of losing its stick, so I imagine I might have 1 or 2 more cards out of it. But I think I'm pretty close to having to redo it again. Okay, I am using Copic markers, And I'm going to start with the fence, and the colors that I'm using are E13, E23, and E57. Usually when I color, I like to put in my lightest color kind of over the whole area that I'm coloring. I think that just kind of, it wets that paper and it helps me to blend the other colors in. So that's why I usually start with my lightest color. I move into my medium color, and then I finish with a little bit of my darkest color. The darkest color usually has the least amount of coloring in the little image that I'm working on. So I'll go through and get half of this fence done, and then we will move on to, I believe we're going to move on to the grass. Next, I'm going to move to the tiles or the bricks around the pool. I wanted those gray. I didn't want to do any other color. I didn't want to go into the browns. I don't know. I've never owned a swimming pool, but it seems to me, if I recall, most of them have like a grayish outside perimeter, so I'm going with grays. The markers that I'm using are W1, W3, and W5. And again, especially since this is such a large layer, I'm going to lay in my W1 first, my lightest color first, and then go back in with my W3 and finally with my W5. There isn't a lot of W5 on this, once again, just because I don't need a whole bunch of the darker color. Next, we're going to do the grassy area. There's no crazy coloring or shading in here. I'm using green, or it's G21 for my base color. And then I'm going to go back in with a little bit of YG63 just to add a little bit of dimension. So, and all I'm doing is just kind of highlighting where the stamp has created little tufts of grass. I'll also add some little lines and some little squiggles just to give that grass a little bit more texture. I'm not too worried about doing a whole bunch of shading just because a lot of it's going to get cut off when I trim down this piece of paper, and a lot of it will be covered by my gnomes and the sentiment. Next up is the bush and the little boulder in the background. For the bush, I'm using the same greens. I'm using G21, YG63, and YG65. For the little boulder, I changed up my greens a little bit. I used a T1, T2, and T5. I wanted that just a little bit different and a little bit darker than the little bricks around my pool. And to finish up my little scene, I need to color in my diving board. So I wanted to keep that very subtle. I didn't want it to draw a lot of attention because there's going to be a lot of other things going on the card. So the colors I used for this were B0000, BG01, and BG45. With this being an interactive card, there's going to be two tabs that pop out from the top and the bottom. I had initially thought I would just use cardstock to make those tabs, but then I kind of wanted them to also blend in with the theme of my card. So I went back with my Distress Oxide inks and I just inked up the one that was going to be popping out of the top with some more clouds. And then the one that was popping out, or is popping out of the bottom, I just did some more of the cow print stenciling on the bottom. I think that just kind of really helped tie that card together. Once I get those inked, I will use the die that's in the set to cut out the tabs to the size that they need to be for the card. Now I'm going to start creating the little piece that will be attached to the gnome on the diving board. So this piece gets cut with one of the dies in the emergency card set. And I'm just going to, I don't think you can really see it in the camera, there are some embossed lines. So I'm going to fold those on the embossed lines, and I first make it kind of a U shape, and then the tabs on the outside, I bend them or fold them to the outside. And then I'm going to take a little bit of glue and just glue on the inside of that U shape and push those ends down, so I have now a little piece with the tabs pointing out. Also, I need to round those little tab pieces that are sticking up a little bit. That just helps the movement of the mechanism. So I've got a pair of really long tweezers in my little cup holder, and that's what I'm using to curl it, but you could use, you know, a paintbrush or a pen or anything, any type of round surface to get those rounded. Now I'm going to start working on the H piece. This piece is also cut out with the die. So I'm going to take a piece of white clear acetate, and this is actually just packaging that I've kind of scrounged up from some of my other stamp sets, and I'm going to cut a strip of that just a smidgen smaller than 2 1/4 inches. I'm going to put a piece of really strong double-sided adhesive tape on one end, and then I'm going to wrap it around that H. I want to adhere the other end to the H, but I don't want to pull it tight. You want to leave enough room on that H that it's going to slide back and forth. The other thing you want to be really careful of is not having any of that adhesive tape extend past the edges of that cellophane, or it's going to get stuck on the cardstock and it's not going to move as freely as you want it to. Next, I'm going to put another strip of adhesive tape on top of that plastic where I just adhered those two pieces together. I'm going to put it on top of that spot, and then I'm going to flip my H over, and I'm going to put another strip of adhesive tape on the bottom of that piece. And you can see I've already cut a little bit over the edge of my acetate, and so it's already starting to give me a little bit of a struggle. And I just want to check it one more time to make sure that acetate is moving back and forth across that center piece freely so that I don't have problems with the tabs popping up and my little gnome jumping on the diving board. Okay, now I'm going to adhere my tabs to my little H piece. The piece that's going to pop out of the top is actually going to be applied to the double-sided tape that was at the bottom of the H. I'm going to get that placed, and I want to make sure it's as straight as possible. And then I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to adhere the little part that looks like the pool to, well, to the top part of where I've put the double-sided tape. But I want to make sure when I adhere that down that the bulk of my coloring is going to pop down from the bottom of that card. And you can see I still am struggling a little bit with that tape. I keep thinking I've got it out of the way and not sticking, but it is. So I'm going to just kind of trim away some of that plastic, and I think that pretty much does the trick. But again, you've got to be really careful not to extend your tape to the outside of that acetate, or your mechanism is just going to just stick all over the place. All right, now we need to make the slit for the little gnome to jump up and down on the board. I am using the smallest of the little slit dies in the set. I'm going to place it where I want it on my board so that my little gnome is just kind of pretty much at the end. It's really important to get this die straight because everything is going to kind of hinge on how that piece is going to slide up in the slit and down. I pretty much thought I had it straight. I had used a ruler, I had taped it down, and I've been trying out this new magic mat that's kind of magnetic. It's not kind of magnetic, it is magnetic. And I have a feeling that it's kind of moving and shifting my dies, even though I've got them taped down. I think the magnet's just a little bit stronger. So this does get cut out a little bit cattywampus. Now that I've got my slit cut, and it is definitely crooked, but I'm just going to roll with it because I have got way too much time on this background. So I'm going to cut out the top notch that gives the recipient kind of an idea of what to do and an area to grasp so that when they pull up on it, the tabs are going to pop up and the little gnome is going to jump up off of the board. Once I get that notch cut, I'm going to lay down my tab in the back, even with the top, as straight as I can, but it can't be perfectly straight, again, because I didn't cut my slit straight. So I'm going to just kind of temporarily tape that. I'm going to use the die from the Paper Crafting Magic stamp set and just stamp the word pull in that opening so the recipient knows exactly what to do. Now we're going to start putting everything together. I'm going to use some foam tape on the little H pieces on the outside edges. I'm using a 2mm tape. I think a 1mm would work, and I finally have some 1mm tape that I'm going to try on the next card that I make. But I'm going to apply that foam tape on those edges, making sure, again, not to catch the acetate or the little tab pieces there, or else your mechanism isn't going to work. I'm going to put that on both of the sides. And then I need to start preparing my little piece that is going to stick through that slot and attach to the back of the gnome that's going to be doing the jumping. So I'm going to take some strong double-sided adhesive and put that on the back of that little piece that I created with its little curved edges. And then I'm going to feed that through the slot in the front of that background of the card. And I'm going to push it all the way down to the bottom of that slot opening. I'm going to remove the protective tape on the back of that little sliding mechanism and also on the back of my little foam pieces. And I'm going to start getting that lined up and prepared to be put on my card in the right place. So I want to make sure that my top is level and that the pull is centered in the little notch that I created. And then I want to make sure that everything is going to kind of be straight at that point. Again, my slit isn't all that straight, so it is going to change things up a little bit. And as you can see, I'm having a little bit of trouble with that bottom piece coming out from the bottom of the card because that mechanism isn't straight on the back. So what I'm going to have to do is kind of move it around a little bit to give it some more room to actually pop out of the bottom. And then when it's up, equal to the bottom of the card, I'm going to have to trim off a little bit because it's not quite straight. So I do need to do a little bit of surgery is what I'm going to call it on this card. Again, this is a really easy interactive card compared to most of the ones I've done. I just had a little bit of trouble because that one slit is not straight up and down. I will definitely be much more cognizant of that when I make future cards. Now I'm going to put the foam tape on the other side of that little H piece, making sure again not to catch my tabs or my acetate. So now I've got actually 2 layers of foam tape built up on my card. So I've got a total of actually 4 millimeters. So in order to level out everything on the rest of the card, I need to build up the sides and the bottom with more foam tape. So I'm going to be using 2 millimeter tape again, but I just need to do 2 layers of each just to make sure that everything is nice and sturdy and there aren't any like little caves or weak spots for the recipient when they're holding the card making the mechanism work. And I really hope that makes some kind of sense. I have another piece of cardstock cut at 5.5 by 5.5, and I'm going to use my MISTI to help me line up that top layer over the bottom layer. And for me, the easiest thing to do is just to peel off the protective tape on the center pieces of this background. And then once I have it placed, I kind of just stick my fingers in on the sides and peel off the 2 final pieces of protective tape on the outside edges. And we're going to check one more time to make sure that all of the pieces are moving freely and we don't have any problems or any areas that are getting stuck. All I have left to do to make the mechanism work is just adhere my little gnome onto that strip. So I'm just going to again use some strong double-sided adhesive tape, making sure that none of those edges of the tape are extending past my little tabs there. I'm going to put that down, peel off the protective tape, and then apply my little gnome. This video has gotten very, very long, and I don't like to make my videos so long, so I'm not going to show you any of the coloring of my little friends. I will tell you what colors I used. The blues are B0000, BG01, FBG2. The oranges are YR01, YR07, YR18. The hot pink is RV10, RV04, RV17. My yellows are Y02, Y08, and Y17. For the skin on my little gnomes, I use E00 and E02. And for their beards and her little braids, I use C1, C3, and C5. The sentiment, I just used the sentiment from the stamp set and I heat embossed it with black embossing powder. And then the little fish on the tabs are actually from the Gnomies Under the Sea stamp set. I just felt like I needed something. The sentiments weren't working right. And then the other sentiment, Hello Sunshine, I believe is the Hello Sunshine. I think that's the name of the die set. That's also with Trinity Stamps. I just cut that from some hot pink and yellow cardstock. Once I had my front done, then I went ahead and cut a piece of cardstock that was 5.5 by 11, scored it at 5.5, and then folded it in half. For the inside of my card, I cut another piece of white cardstock 4 3/4 by 4 3/4 and stamped the sentiment on the center of that. And then I had my little girl gnome left over from coloring and a few of the fishes. So I added those to the inside of my card just to kind of tie everything together. At the beginning of this video, I said I was going to also be submitting it to the current CraftRoulette challenge, which is number 269. The parameters for that challenge were actually what I thought pretty easy this week. Sometimes they're really difficult. But this week, the project was square card, which this is. It's 5.5 by 5.5. The elements was clouds, and I have clouds on the background of my card, also on one of my tabs. The color was butterfly or butterflies, and I've got all different colors of what could be butterflies. And then the random one was tie, which was kind of tricky because I wasn't quite sure how I was going to tie that into my card. But then I thought, you know what? Let's just tie the one little gnome on the inner tube to the side of the pool so he doesn't go floating too far away. Not like that pool is very big, but anyway, that was my random. So if you're wondering why I've got him tied off, it was actually to hit one of the parameters for CraftRoulette. All right, that does it for this particular card. Thank you so much for following along with the process. I know this video was a wee bit long this time, and I don't like to do that, but there was a lot of area to cover. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up if you like this video. You can subscribe to my channel and be notified of future videos. You can also follow me on Instagram at Sandy Cogdell or on my blog, www.sandycogdelldesigns.com. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great summer. Bye-bye.